that. Anyway, I'm delighted to see you all here tonight. We have a fantastic speaker. I can't say highly enough of my favorite person. In fact, he's one of the lawyers that I know that I really admire. Yeah, I mean, when I was in business, I was being sued almost every other week. And of course, I always won, but they were always looking for insurance money. But with Brett, I don't have to worry. Anyway, it's really good to see you all here tonight. Before we begin, I'd like to have 1 minute of silence for those wounded military people that got hurt, and also for those who gave their all. So 1 minute of silence, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, would you mind standing, if you can, to say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of our country? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may sit down. Now, I just want to mention a couple of housekeeping issues. If you have a cell phone, would you mind silencing it so not interfere with our speaker? As you know, we do not charge for these meetings, but we do appreciate it what you can give. Now, unfortunately, we're facing 2018 next year, where they're doubling our room rate. I'm not complaining because they need the money, but I wish you would give that consideration when you donate money to us. Thank you. Now, the other thing I need to mention is I'm looking for 1 or 2 people that are interested in doing our telephone call from our phone list. It's for people who don't have computers. I do it. It takes about 1 hour every month. So we're not asking for a lot of time, but it's up to you if you can help. I really would appreciate it. The sign up is right here if you can help. Thank you. Now on to political issues that we're facing today. It seems all hell is breaking loose in the Democratic Party. From congressmen to senators are being accused of sexual indiscretions. And all they wanted to do was crucify Roy Moore. Now, the women that are accusing him, it took place over 40 years ago. Isn't it strange today that they're coming from different sources, and they're all represented by Attorney Allred? Now, she's refusing to show the yearbook that they're claiming that Roy wrote. But the hand experts claim that they need the original to verify the signatures because the photocopy doesn't do it. So that's what we're facing as far as Trump is concerned. But Trump, fortunately, has seen the motives of these rhinos and Democrats that are applying to destroy the December election. But Trump is standing front and forward in protecting Mr. Moore. I say, hail Trump. Now, the other issue is the FBI, Mueller, Comey, Reichenstein, and others are complacent in the sale of 20% of our uranium material to Russia. Now, and they're also blaming, of course, Hillary and her foundation. But I was just wondering, excuse me for saying this, but what if Hillary did win? I have to wash my mouth out with soap. But anyway, fortunately, she did not win. And Trump is doing a bang-up job trying to straighten this country out. It just so happens that we have a bunch of rhinos in the Republican Party that are trying to fight him. I can understand the Democrats' position, but the Republicans, come on. They don't deserve to be called Republicans. Now, I'd like to talk about our program tonight. Our speaker today is an American patriot, an extraordinary person, because he represents hundreds of ordinary citizens like you and me who were harassed by the bureaucracies of the local, state, federal, and school districts that have exceeded their authority in authorized regulations and laws. A few examples are bakers and photographers that refuse to serve couples that infringe on their religious beliefs. Now, all they have to do, if they go to the photographer and he refuses, they just go to another one. But that's not what they're after. They're after anybody that disagrees with them. So, and then the other issue is allowing anybody that has a feeling that the feminine side is showing, that they can enter a girl's bathroom and shower at ease. And Brad is fighting that issue too. So then there's other things that he's fighting. Workplace discrimination, Common Core, gender discrimination, religious persecution in the military and civilian courts are some of the issues that Brad's team is fighting successfully. This is one that really gets me. EPA, they are claiming that rain puddles are equal to streams, rivers, and creeks. I mean, come on. How ridiculous, these bureaucrats have nothing to do except to come up with these idiotic ideas. And anyway, we're here because Brad is successfully fighting these issues. Excuse me. Now, Brad's team protects the rights of ordinary citizens at no cost to the people that he serves. That's why I claim that Brad Dacus is America's patriot and hero. Both you and I can help Brad continue his steadfast fight to protect regular citizens that cannot afford to fight City Hall by helping the Pacific Justice Institute with contributions. We cannot do it alone, but with Brad's efforts through PJI, a great deal can be accomplished to save these unconstitutional actions. Until Trump drains the swamp, we will be exposed to these unlawful acts by the bureaucrats. With that high note, allow me to introduce our speaker and American hero, Brad Dacus. Brad, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Richard. Appreciate it. I tell you, I know everyone's getting real discouraged at times and can be real depressed at times. And I just want you to know that the fact that my wife and my two kids and I are going to be moving next month permanently to Costa Rica in no way should be looked as throwing in the towel. No, I'm just teasing. That's a joke. That's a joke. So I'm not moving to Costa Rica. It's too humid down there. That's for sure. But no, it's really great to be here. Thank you for that awesome introduction. And I want you to know that most of it's true, too. So as an attorney, yes. But it's first, let me just ask you, how many of you presently received the Pacific Justice Institute update via email? Raise your hand. Via email, raise your hand. Okay, very good. How many of you get something via mail, hard mail in the mailbox? Raise your hand. Okay, good. A good number of you do. Okay, so For those of you who did not raise your hand for either of those, or if you get one and you'd like to get the other, on your table are these little white sheets, and they're real simple. If you just fill these out, we'll keep you updated with what's going on. We have Pacific Justice. I think one reason why people like to get our material, there's a couple of reasons. Number one is it's accurate. We don't believe in hype. I don't know about you, but sometimes I've gotten some stuff in the mail that said everything but the sky's falling. I mean, just hype, hype, hype. And we don't do that. Why? Because I have relatives in Bakersfield. And my kinfolk in Bakersfield receive our newsletter. They receive our Legal Insider email. And I don't want to be guilty with one of them having a fatal heart attack because I overly exaggerated on the letter or the email or something like that. So because of my kinfolk in Bakersfield, it keeps me in check. So it's very accurate and very, you can count on that. But also, it's often very positive. Why? Because we have successes. We have victories. Yes, even here in California, where 85% of our cases are, which right here in California, we've been blessed by God's grace with incredible victories and upsets that even I would have bet against. Now, when the head general would bet against his own soldiers winning, that's not a good sign sometimes. But we have seen some incredible successes and breakthroughs that have been real encouraging to me. I'll never forget the homeschooling case. We had 3 judges already had ruled that homeschooling was illegal in California. Illegal, unless you're a credentialed teacher. Illegal in California. We petitioned to have them rehear the case, and they agreed to rehear the case. I've never seen that before in my life, where 3 appellate judges said, we'll rehear the case. They reheard it, and then they tore us to shreds on oral argument. All 3 of them just diced and sliced us. The other side was real nice to them, and us were just real mean. It was so obvious that we'd lost. We were already drafting the appeal brief to the state Supreme Court. People said, do we have any chance? I said, unless God intervenes, we have no chance. And so all I can say is pray. That's it, pray. And thousands and thousands and thousands prayed. And those 3 judges reversed themselves and said they were wrong. And anyway, so it's incredible. So we've seen those kind of successes, yes. And you can clap on that. They'll clap. That's good. But right now, we are faced with what I would call the perfect storm. Perfect storm. And what do you mean by perfect storm? And often we in California, we really don't know what a perfect storm is. Because we really don't have these kind of perfect storms, if you will, very much. We get some hard rains and things. You want to know what a perfect storm is? Move to Texas. How many Texans, Texans do we have here who've lived in Texas before? Come on, admit it, it's okay. You survived. Right here, I survived. But in Texas, you got like these 2 fronts. You've got this warm, moist front, strong, full of hot humidity. And then you have this front of northern aggression. Little joke there, okay. Anyway, coming down to invade and pound on that warm, hot, humid front, this cold, dry front. The 2 of them bash together. You get these big, huge storms, tornadoes, just all kinds of stuff. It's just, you don't know if you're going to be suddenly sucked up into the heavens somewhere anytime. And in fact, people say, why are these people in Texas so more serious about their faith? I say, well, it's simple. I said in the springtime, they never know if they could just suddenly be sucked away with one of these big dark green clouds swirling overhead. And in the summertime, they're reminded where they go if they don't go to heaven. I'll just leave it at that. But anyway, that perfect storm scenario is what we have right now legally in our system, in our legal system, that I thought I would never see in my lifetime. But we have it. On one side, we have very outrageously, incredibly unthinkable liberal cases that are trouncing upon our Constitution and basic fundamental rights like parents' rights over their kids, individuals' rights to free speech, the free exercise of religion, the freedom of association, the freedom of the press. All these basic fundamental First Amendment rights being trounced upon, and on colleges and in government and all over the place. And yet, and these are cases that are coming out that are just unthinkable. I'm going to talk about those tonight. But I want to put it in context so you guys don't get early indigestion or strokes or anything. So the context is the other side of the front, the other side of the storm. And this is the good news. You see, the other side of the storm is where all these cases, the really bad cases, usually end up eventually. And that is the Supreme Court. And our Supreme Court is about to become the most constitutional, respecting Supreme Court in the last 100 years. And it is exciting. And I thought I'd never see this. Just a year ago, it looked like this was but a pipe dream. Just a little over a year ago, before the election. I'll be honest with you. I'd already written the monthly newsletter assuming Hillary had won. Oh. That's how pessimistic I was. I just thought, oh. And then to watch those returns come in, bit by bit. And then it was like, Iowa and Ohio and Florida and North Carolina. And I'm sitting here watching these states, and then when he said Wisconsin, I saw the waters part. And everything dramatically changed in an instant, literally. The federal court appointments, we've had 26. In addition to the most recent Supreme Court justice, we also had 26 appointments to the federal bench, so district court, circuit court, and guess what? There's about another 125 that are in the process, that are going to be started in or in the process. I'm very excited about that. We have a Supreme Court. We have Justice Kennedy. I actually thought he was going to be stepping down last June. I think he thought he was going to be stepping down last June. Everything was all prepping as if he's about to step down. And then some issues came up in the courts, and he suddenly felt compelled, I need to stay on a little longer. But he will be stepping down next June. Why? I know. Why? Because you see, and this is his words, not mine. You see, he's a Republican, and he wants to make sure that he's replaced by a Republican senator, or by a Republican president. Now, I know. Some people are like, what? As long as he thinks it's fine. As long as he thinks that's what he is, great. And so it's and the odds are are far from certain that the Senate is going to be Republican controlled after the midterm election. We may actually gain seats, but it's not predetermined by any means. So I believe to make sure that that he's replaced with someone appointed with a somewhat conservative perspective and constitutional perspective, which is how he holds himself, then he would be stepping down in probably next June. And that would be the decisive final checkmate, if you will. And then Justice Thomas, I think will likely step down as well. Now, Justice Thomas is a great justice. He and Neil Gorsuch are the only two on the bench that are actual, what I call natural law advocates. That's really getting deep in understanding. When someone is a natural law advocate, you know their roots are very, very, very deep in the proper interpretation of the Constitution. And so I won't get into the whole theory of natural law and all that, but why would we want him to step down? What's good about that? What's good about it is that he's almost 70. Now, 70 today is what 50 used to be, right? So you think 70 is not too old, but let's say he serves another 10 years, say he decides to retire at 80. What are the odds that there's going to be someone in the White House like Donald Trump with that perspective of the Constitution, appoint his replacement 10 years from now, much less a U.S. Senate that's dominated and controlled, because the thing swings like this. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Yes. So people say, "No, I don't like it. The liberals are in control." Don't worry. The next few elections, it'll swing like this. And don't worry, liberals, it'll swing back like this. I don't know why. We as Americans are like that. We're fickle, very fickle in terms of politics, often it seems. But the good thing, though, is that he realizes and he sees that. So I think he's probably going to step down to get someone appointed who's young, who can be around for the next 4 decades on the bench, and to secure that. And that would be not only a majority, but then that would be also a relatively young majority, locking up about 3 decades for case law for our country and our posterity, our grandchildren and children. And then we also have Ginsburg. Now, she's 90. No, she's not 90 yet, but although she's probably holding out to hit 90. But I get a feel there's good reason to believe that she may one way or the other be stepping down. How do I say this tactfully? But anyway, but her time for stepping down may be coming up in the next few years easily. Quite possibly in the first term of if not the second, of the Trump administration. And I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in her little living room, watching her face as she watches the returns of the election. Because she was totally gambling and betting for sure Hillary was going to win. Otherwise, she would have stepped down and been replaced by one of Obama's replacements. And just watching one state after another. And then when they said Wisconsin, just to look at her face. Oh, well. That's a fun thought for another day. So anyway, so the good news is the perfect storm is just that. It's a perfect storm on both counts. On one side, we have a federal bench, which is moving in the right direction decisively. On the other hand, we have horrific cases. And you're saying, well, would it be perfect if we didn't have these horrific cases? Oh, no. Perfect is to have these horrific cases. Because these horrific cases give that bench the opportunity to set incredible case law for generations to come. If we didn't have these kind of ugly cases, the ugliest of the ugly, the most unthinkable of the unthinkable, we wouldn't have the opportunity for our posterity's sake to be setting great case law with this great court. It's a perfect storm. What are some of the funnel clouds? I guess you carry out the analogy here. A funnel cloud, that's like a tornado. It's early. Okay, no. Some of you guys probably could. Okay, yeah, you understand what a funnel cloud is. Okay. Your Texans definitely know what a funnel cloud is. We've had an interesting case of attacks on churches and synagogues, for that matter, with regards to their not being taxed. Now, everyone knows you don't tax religious institutions. Why? Well, number one, it's because they have a service. There's a benefit to society. They've actually served as the conscience of the nation. It's a role that government can't play and should never play. And it's a valuable role in our nation's history. It's proven itself. From the Revolutionary War all the way through the Civil War, the Civil Rights Movement, etc. But there's another reason why religious institutions aren't taxed, and that is simply this. What the government can tax, the government can control. We know that, right? And that's why they were not taxed even before the Revolutionary War. They were not taxed. And yet, we have a town in the San Francisco Bay Area, San Rafael, that's trying to get away with taxing churches and synagogues. And here's how. You see, the state of California, the state law and the state constitution, first it says that to conduct a property tax, it must be based on an assessed value, number one. Number two, religious institutions are to never be given a property tax. Very clear what the law is, right? Well, what San Rafael decided is they said, well, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give a property tax, and a fee based upon the number of square feet in a building. So, and we'll charge so much per square foot on a building. It'll be a A building fee. That's it, a building fee. Well, we looked and said, no, it's a property tax. And you're not even abiding by the law by doing it based on appraised value. You're doing it based on square footage. So it's a double no. And so one of our attorneys, is one of our newer attorneys, I call him our bulldog, that's my nickname for him, Ray Hackey. He's a great attorney, and he just filed a lawsuit against San Rafael. And I'm looking forward to this, because why am I looking forward to this case? Because when we win this case, this ugly, ugly case, what are we be doing? Setting great case law far down ahead in the future. And that's why California is so important, because this is the incubator of the ugliest of the ugly liberal cases. Yeah, we are. We're the incubator. People say, Brad, why do you have 5 offices? We have 5 offices in California, 2 in northern, 3 in southern. Why don't you have 1 in Kansas? Why don't you, we spread out across the nation? And I said, well, why didn't Eisenhower have a brigade in Kansas? Because the battle was in Normandy, right? The beaches of Normandy. Well, California is unquestionably the modern day beaches of Normandy when it comes to the fight for freedom and liberty in this country. And so that's why we have our brigades here in California. We have more, by the way, we have more offices, and all of them are donated office space because I'm real cheap. Donated offices, we have more offices here in California than any other organization in the country. We have more full-time attorneys here in California than any other comparable organization in the country. We have 5 full-time attorneys. We have the largest network of volunteer affiliate attorneys in California than any other organization in the country. And then finally, we handle more cases in case matters defending faith, family, and freedom in California than any other organization in the country. So I like the fact we are where we are by God's grace and providence to be doing what we're doing. Now, let's change it a little bit. What about, let's take something, this is something you probably won't relate to very well. What about like a retirement community? Bullseye, right? I'm going to give you a hypothetical. What if you had, let's say you have a number of different gatherings here, right? Probably in the clubhouses, right? You have, what are some of the clubs you have? Some of the groups here that meet? There's 7? There's 7 different groups that meet here?
No.
7 clubs.
7 clubs, okay. But what are some different group meetings that you have? Like,
Cannabis Club.
Cannabis Club.
Chinese
Okay.
club.
India, Chinese club, okay. So different clubs, activity clubs, different kinds of things, right? Well, in Bakersfield, California, in a Del Webb retirement community, there's a group that got together and they had a Bible study club. And guess what? One atheist in the community, an intolerant atheist, because there are atheists who are tolerant, and hats off to them, but this is an intolerant atheist who complained and says, I want them out. Other groups can use it, but I don't want them because they're religious. And so the homeowner association said, we don't want to be sued. You guys, you're out. It was right before Christmas. You're done. You can't have your meetings here. No praying, no reading the scripture, nothing. And so we went and got involved, and we filed a lawsuit on behalf of leadership, and they got back in the clubhouse. But now the homeowner association is trying to come up with new rules after the atheist has already moved on. Turns out they like that idea, keeping out those religious people. There's 60 that meet there, 60. And they're trying to come up with new rules. So we filed a lawsuit to keep them from booting them out off the retirement community. And in California, it's a real strong case. So we're really working hard to make sure that happens. That's in Del Webb Community, Bakersfield. I would say something. A state is really in trouble. California is really in trouble when you have things like this happening in Bakersfield. I mean, Bakersfield, that's like a little piece of Texas right there in California. Nothing happens in Bakersfield anyway. But apparently that's not true. So we've also been involved in dealing with colleges and universities And there's been such a tremendous, horrific battle in our college universities across our country, public universities, or Duke and Princeton and other universities, where there's a growing attitude of intolerance towards people with a Judeo-Christian philosophy of life. There's also tremendous anti-Semitism growing in our college campuses like never before. It's often by groups that have a different perspective on Israel than many Americans, a very hostile negative. So there's been a lot of anti-Semitism and a lot of violence. Even I'll never forget UC Irvine. You guys remember what happened there? It was so bad that the university had to intervene and boot this group off campus because they were so violent and intimidating in their actions against students who were Jewish. And that was horrific. It was I'm going to say the wrong name, Palestinian group or something, I forget what it was. And I'm sure there's Palestinian students on campus who don't approve of that either, that kind of activity. But this group was very radical. And then we have people who want to speak on campus. Now, universities and campuses are supposed to be the what? The open marketplace of ideas. Stimulate the thinking, challenge what was never challenged, all this kind of stuff. And now fast forward to universities today, and it's one big snowflake, which is don't say anything that in any way offends anyone, and it's protected speech. There was a poll taken by millennials, and millennials are asked the question, do you believe in freedom of speech, free speech? I think it was like 70, close to 80% said, yes, I believe in free speech. Great. Then they asked the question, do you believe that free speech should be protected so long as it doesn't offend anyone? 55% said yes. Now, we don't need free speech protection if everyone agrees with it, right? To quote one of the most liberal justices on the U.S. Supreme Court, he said, it's the speech that is the most offensive that is in the most need of protection. It's so important. I think it was of Justice Brennan. And yet, that is right where we're at. I think so many, not even just our founding fathers, but many in the civil rights movement, I think if they were alive today, would just be shaking their heads when they see the attitude of our society today. And when a society has one as a philosophy where there's only one way of thinking, and it's our way of thinking, anyone who thinks differently must be silenced, that mirrors other societies in history that we've gone to war against to set them free. And I don't think there's any country out there that can go to a war with America to set us free if we continue down this track. We, Americans, have to set ourselves free from this trend and what we see building in this country. And that's what we at Pacific Justice Institute are doing. We're pledging to defend. We have a professor in a university, I think it was in India, and he has been wrongfully terminated because he was stimulating thought on one of those subjects that you're not supposed to stimulate critical thinking on. There's only one way to think. And he was getting back and forth, not proselytizing his religion, no. And because he did the back and forth, he was fired. Now there's some other professors who are liberal who are saying, whoa, wait a minute. If this happens to him, it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. So we at Pacific Justice are defending that professor. And we'll be doing that all across the country more and more to maintain some kind of integrity in our university system. My son and daughter, my son's 15, almost 16, my daughter's almost 14. And I've got the dilemma of trying to think of, gosh, what kind of college and what college university do I want him to go to?
Hillsdale.
Yeah, Hillsdale. Literally, that is one of 5 on the list for the whole country. Hillsdale is one of them. Liberty is another one. Patrick Henry College is another one. And then there's two and 3 in California. So I'll leave it at that. I don't want to spill the beans because then I'm going to offend someone probably. Yeah. But I would say Texas A&M is my alma mater, but it's
Which one?
Texas A&M. I love Texas A&M because that's where I learned my manners. So you guys got that. I never do that joke with high schoolers because they don't get it. There's no, they don't. Anyway, it's funny how that works. College kids, sometimes college kids get it anyway. All right, so college universities, so we're challenging, we're working hard to protect college universities. Recently in California, they were going to lose their Cal Grant eligibility for students wanting to attend at their Christian colleges that refuse to renounce their belief in Scripture and morality when it comes to same-sex marriage. Professors who are married to someone of the same sex, or providing housing for same-sex couples. And fortunately, that legislation was shot down, but we understand there's plans for it to come back up again, and we think it will. We also believe in free speech. We've seen free speech under attack. Classical free speech. What do you think free speech, most classical free speech is what? Someone on a soapbox in a park or on a public sidewalk speaking. In America, is that protected? Yes. Decisively it's protected in constitutional law. It's called a traditional public forum. Traditional public forum. Public sidewalks. And yet, why is it in the last year and a half we've had 3 people speaking in a traditional public forum who were arrested and prosecuted because of their speech? That's why, it's because of their speech. One, the most recent one, they're all 3 pastors or ministers and preaching the gospel theology and of Christianity. And they were arrested because of the content. It was offensive to the listeners. In in Las Vegas had a little interesting rule though. They were really clever about how they did it. They said, oh yes, you have free speech, so long as you keep walking while you're speaking. So I want to tell everyone, and my 4th point is really important. It's critical that you literally lose your audience. They want you to literally have to lose your audience in order to speak in Las Vegas. Now, what is Las Vegas? Why do they have a problem with preachers? Oh, wait a minute. Sin City. Okay, never mind. So, anyway, he was arrested, and he was being criminally prosecuted, and our attorneys went in. One of them was our bulldog, Ray Hackey, and we had a local attorney there as well in Nevada. And the day of the trial, Las Vegas, the attorneys dropped charges, and that we did not have the prosecution. Same thing was down in San Diego County. The DA, the day before the trial, dropped the charges. That prosecutor was going to drop the charges earlier if our client was willing to go through a reorientation program put on by the LGBTQ community. Literally. Now, what book does that remind you of? Is there a book that comes out to mind? Like 1984? 1984?
Yeah.
Remember George Orwell's 1984? That's how the book ended, with the guy being taken to reorientation programming. And this actually happened in the United States, from the district attorney's office, not from some bureaucrat or politicians, from the DA, the county DA. She attempted this. And we said no, and we're going to litigate. And then she dropped it the day before the trial. So free speech is under attack, and we're going to take these cases on every single time. One of our goals at Pacific Justice is to leave no one at the side of the road, but to make sure everyone gets protection. Let me go through some other cases here quickly, because I want to have some time for Q&A. And I forgot to ask what my cutoff time was. Was it 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock? Was it 11? 11:30? Was that? Okay, 12. No, teasing. All right, but I'll just a few more cases, and we'll do Q&A. We also have like grotesque things that are unthinkable. Things that I never would have imagined would be attempted in my lifetime. But that's how fast things are moving. In San Francisco, they have a public park, and they have a nice, newly remodeled restrooms on 2 of them, both ends of the park. But they decided to build an open-air urinal. It's like a semicircle about this high. Is it made out of concrete, so there's some? Oh, no. It's made like out of chain link fence. It has a little vinyl flap in the front, but anyone walking by could see the personal stuff and everything. And that's often the intent, I believe, of those who are using the facility. In fact, it is what we've discovered. I won't get into the details. But so we at Pacific Justice filed a lawsuit against the city of San Francisco for violating the privacy of people who don't want to see it. Because that's how privacy is also defined by the municipal code. We do our homework at PJI. And so we check out the municipal code, the state code, the federal statutes, the health and safety code. Boom. Doesn't meet the health and safety code. Boom. It violates equal protection, and that doesn't provide equal opportunity for urinating for women as it does men. It even violates the Americans with Disabilities Act, because disabled people can't use it the same as, we hit them on all sides, rapid fire. And we're appealing the case. The judge from San Francisco ruled against us. He says, I think he knows he's going to probably lose on appeal. So in his opinion, he lauded us for our excellent high quality of legal advocacy, and which is a good signal. It's a good signal that I think he's maybe hedging that we could win. So we also have another case right now pending before the United States Supreme Court in the pro-life area movement. It's a case defending we're challenging another state law, outrageous law, saying that all pro-life clinics have to have a large sign in their waiting room telling women where they can get a free or low-cost abortion and the phone number. These are private, non-government funded, religious counseling centers. And they have to advertise something that goes totally against who they are, what they believe, and the whole reason for existing. And guess who was behind this? You think? Well, anyway, I'll let you guess. But I know Planned Parenthood has been losing business. And so obviously they didn't come out against this. And there's no requirement, or somebody thinking, I bet there's a requirement for them to have a sign saying, if you want counseling to alternatives to abortion, call this number. No, there's no, that's not a part of the law. They don't have to post anything. So I think it's a very important case for free speech. Why? Not just for pro-life clinics, but can you imagine if the government gets away with that? That's like the government being able to tell someone or entity, a synagogue, a church, to say, oh, Rabbi, you have total freedom to say whatever you want in your synagogue, so long as you also say this. And what does that remind you of? Maybe of why people came to America in the first place? To escape the mandatory requirements of the King's Church? Anyway, so it's a real important case. These are cases I never would have dreamed of. And yet they are the end of the slippery slope, it seemingly, or at least they're the beginning of the slippery slope. Then we have some important sanctity of human life cases. We have cases where, sometimes it is our time to go. It is appointed for all men to die once, and then comes judgment. We all have that time, right? But it's wrong for government to expedite that more than our Maker necessarily wants, and that's what we have unfortunately taking place. We had a case called a little baby. I won't get too much into these because this is sort of depressing. Baby Israel, they were going to pull the cord on this little baby, little infant. Parents had a neurologist come in, said, wait a minute, you can't do this. No, we're going to do this at such and such a time. So pay your respects. Well, the parents didn't pay their respects. The parents got on the phone and brought in an outside neurologist to do an independent examination. The neurologist says, this baby's not brain dead. And in fact, the baby, when they heard the mother's voice, would squeeze her fingers, squeeze her finger with her little hand. It was clear. We were contacted, and we went, and we got the facts, because sometimes someone is ready to pass, and they've already left the body, and it's time to let it go. And we looked at the facts and said, this is not the case. We went into court. We got an emergency temporary restraining order to order that the baby not be taken. And then we got an order to allow the parents to have the child removed and brought to an alternative medical facility. They did. At the medical facility, they had the brain scan, all that kind of stuff done, which should have been done by the children's hospital that the child was in. And sure enough, it validated brainwave activity. The child is not gone. And then they were notified, they contacted the hospital, another doctor there. Doctor said, look, I will take care of the child. I'll provide therapy. We'll work with the child to get the child stimulated and making it in progression. I'll personally take care of that. So they came back to the hospital, and the hospital removed that doctor from the case, brought on another, and said, we already have a death certificate already made out, and terminated the baby. Yes, so we have Pacific Justice. We don't just stand by and let these things happen. We sue. And so we have continued the litigation. We're taking it up on appeal to provide greater due process protection for families. We had an adult man. We had to get an emergency injunction from the state Supreme Court this year in order to save the life of a man who they wanted to pull the cord of on who was not brain dead. So that's the new dilemma that we didn't have just 15 years ago. I call it the pre-Obama years, or pre-Obamacare years. And yet that's what we're faced with. And I think, Lord, we're going to see some reform, some greater due process protection. I mean, it's just not right that a hospital who has an interest in terms of their own costs should have the final say as to whether or not someone lives or not. Should be able to get outside, independent source who has no financial incentives to prematurely release someone. That's a nice way of putting it. What about those seeking asylum from other countries? Last year, estimates were about 90,000 Christians alone, much less there were other people of other faiths, but Christians alone were executed. Not dying from starvation, no, executed. Or 90,000, over 90,000 in the world last year. As it turns out, we at Pacific Justice found out there's something we can do. We were notified by a gentleman who was seeking asylum, he and his family. Actually, a gentleman, individual, then his family. He was from Egypt. He was an evangelist, evangelical Christian in Egypt. Now, evangelical Christians are below Coptics. Now, Coptic Christians are like treated like dirt. If you're an evangelical Christian, you're treated like subdirt, like bacteria, I guess. I don't know. And that's what happens. He was caught sharing his faith, because that's what they don't like about him. They share their faith. And they tortured him for him to reveal the other people in his underground church. And he would not, and he's got scars, cigarette burn scars on his body. He was released, he fled to Jordan, and then he fled to the United States. And he was going to be sent back by the prior administration. Interesting. People seeking to come in America because of religious persecution, their life and death is on the line, and we're going to send those back? And yet, those breaking the law for pecuniary gain, we're going to look the other way. Terrible double standard. And at the very least, we need to protect those who are here, right? Because of religious persecution. I think it's very important. Our founding fathers came here for that reason. Although public schools will say, no, they came here for financial gain. Financial opportunity. Oh, really? You want to read about the Pilgrims and, yeah, how they died? Yeah. Anyway, we at Pacific Justice Institute has taken his on, and now we've taken on another and another and another. Most of them from a lot of them countries who are from Muslim countries where they have a death sentence. The other family was from Bangladesh. He was a pastor of a church, one of the pastors. Another pastor was already killed. And they had a death threat on him in order to, the same's going to happen to you unless you shut down. And he looked at his wife and his kids and he fled. And we recently protected and defended him. Those of you who attended our celebration of justice heard his testimony. Was anyone there who was here, our celebration of justice? You were there, okay. He was the one who gave the story, so anyway. It was a wonderful, touching story. So we at Pacific Justice are doing that, defending families to make sure that they're get the protection they need, and also one of our interns was a Jewish his gentleman from Iran. And the persecution of Jewish people living in countries like Iran is horrific. And so we at Pacific Justice are very sensitive to those. And then we have the boys going girls locker rooms in schools. We're litigating that. We had some major breakthroughs on the issues of the petitions and the signatures. We've made some great advancements in this area on litigation recently. Have total access now to all the signatures so we can make our case. And hopefully we'll get it on the ballot, if not 2018, 2020. It's taking a long time. That's what litigation does. But I feel really good about it. And it's real important. We already have a border issue case we're looking into dealing with several women who are complaining. Why are they complaining, these border agent women? Well, it's because there's a man who's now come out and says he's a woman. And he's demanding that he be able to use the women's locker room and showers. And from what we understand, allegedly he has said that not only is he entitled not to have to use a little separate changing area, but he wants to use the showers and keep the shower curtains wide open. And some women are complaining. Well, these hate-filled women, intolerant women. No. But you see how that's our twisted society, isn't it? It's like, no, what about privacy? Isn't privacy an important thing? So those are the kinds of things that we're looking into and defending. Just recently, a little success was dealing with legislation that was going to require all religious institutions to not discriminate with regard to their employees' sexual lifestyles. Yeah, it's called the Reproductive Health Act, but it's much broader than people think. It deals with any activity, of course, associated with reproduction, which is all sexual activity that the courts have held. And it passed the state assembly, the state senate, overwhelmingly. It went to the governor's desk, and we thought, we've got to prepare for it. So we had it all prepped to file our lawsuit on Monday morning to challenge it when it was going to be signed on Sunday. Except the governor at 1 a.m. vetoed it, to our shock and surprise. I think the reason he vetoed it is because he maybe got some counsel saying it's probably going to end up losing as it makes its way up the courts as being unconstitutional. I don't think this governor wants a legacy of the wacky governor that signed laws that were struck down as unconstitutional. That's my hypothesis. So, or maybe his Jesuit background convicted him, I don't know. So either way, we dodged a bullet. But when this governor's gone, who do you think his replacement's going to be? It's not very pretty. And if his replacement is who most of us think, some of the candidates, they're all more liberal than Brown. He looks like a choir boy compared to the others. So it's going to be a real challenge. And then finally, one more thing is I want to just say is Southern Poverty Law Center, as you know, has gone to war openly, not passively, openly against organizations like Pacific Justice. Also, Franklin Graham, he's a hate monger. Ben Carson, another hate monger. We have other organizations, hate mongers. Conservative Republicans of California, hate mongers. And their goal is to vilify and isolate and silence organizations. Some of these organizations out there have lost their credit card ability. Another one lost their ability to get insurance from an insurance carrier. Another one is Google. Actually, this was Prager. Lost his ability to have any kind of advertising, I think financial fundraising advertising I think it was through Google. Took him off because the categorization. It's scary. And so we at Pacific Justice have been very aggressive, and we've worked with consortium to produce a video film telling all the truth, and it's going to be really interesting. Those of you, make sure you get your film, this thing right here. We'll email you, and you can download it. You can watch it for free. But it is a real eye-opener and about the Southern Poverty Law Center. And for sake of time, I won't get into that. Let's do some Q&A now so I can be respectful. Yes?
Let me steal the roaming mic if you can pick up
yes.
the cord one there.
Yes.
Just raise your hand, I'll bring the mic over to you. And can you open up a few hundred more offices in California?
Yes. That would be nice, huh?
Let me first get
Hello,
my
testing. There we go. Very good. Yes.
Two quick questions. One is, normally hospitals make money when patient remains in ICU. So why they were trying to kill those 2-3 cases, that is very surprising to me. Normally pulling the plug, they delay,
Right.
even though health derivatives are telling and relatives, family are pressing.
Yeah.
They don't do that. That's question one. And number two is, why this is happening in America? We are losing freedom of speech and freedom, religious freedom and everything. Why do you think all of a sudden? Because when I came to US in 70s, this was totally unheard of.
Yeah.
And where did we go wrong and why? Just your
Right.
take on this.
Yeah, the first with regard to the universities, our understanding was it was costing them, not making them money. I don't know the details on that, so I can't answer more than just simply that. As far as why are we at where we are, I think several reasons. One is the universities and the public schools. And if you've heard the book Rules for Radicals, Solinsky, that's what they're carrying out. It is so on point with what he orchestrated. You vilify, you separate. If you separate, you don't talk, you don't befriend the other opposition. Then you vilify the opposition. Then you silence the opposition, and you eliminate the opposition. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. And it's in your face, an in your face kind of way. When you talk about a poll was taken, is it roughly 20% of millennials who believe in violence if it means your cause, to further your cause? Really? I mean, that's like a terrorist mentality. That's so un-American to what this country's about. So I think our universities have been completely taken over. That's why parents need to be really careful about where they put their kids. Just because it has a cross in front of it or a Star of David in front of it doesn't mean that it is what it says it is or the values are congruent. So I think that's a lot of it. And then also you have big money people like Soros who are really putting large sums. He just recently pledged $18 billion to a philanthropic fund to fund things like the Southern Poverty Law Center and their agenda. They're very, very committed. And it's a shame. And then you have also just a lot of young people who don't understand the concept of individual responsibility, accountability, not blaming everyone in the world for you not getting all the things that you're entitled to. My own kids, we're planning on talking about, like tonight, my wife and I were talking about them. And the need, we live down here in Southern Orange County. This is nice. This is really great, right? But that's one problem. It's so nice. And I want my kids to have a good understanding of how blessed they really are. So we're saying, okay, what country can we take them to learn this that's not dangerous? So if you have any suggestions.
The Bronx.
The Bronx, okay. Anyway, so next question. So those are some of the things. And then we have the media in Hollywood. They're competing right now to take over Fox News. People aren't giving much attention to it, but whoever takes it over and owns it could very well change the messaging, and then we have to start all over again.
Brad, first of all, I'd like to commend you and your organization for protecting the rights of our citizens and the wonderful job you do,
Thank you.
and we hope you keep it up. Also, I'm concerned, I know it's been going on quite a few years, especially in California, from like K to 12, there's a lot of liberal agendas. Can you hear me?
Oh, that's great.
Is it
Yeah.
better now?
Thank you.
In K to 12
Yeah.
levels of public school, the school books are very biased towards liberalism.
Extremely
And they're
biased.
teaching things that parents don't agree with. And
Right.
They're forced upon the students and the parents. What can be done about that?
Well, there's homeschooling. There's private schooling. I would say there's charter schooling, but even then you've got to be very careful because they're often mandated to use state-approved textbook material. I talked today. I was on the phone talking to a young man. He's married, has a little toddler, and he says, what are we gonna do about schooling? I mean, we're in California. What do you recommend? And I told him, I says, you're in a tough situation. Have you ever thought about moving to Texas? And he goes, really? I go, well, yeah. I mean, it's terrible because even if you have good teachers, and there are some good teachers who are teaching with a great heart, with a great attitude and a great worldview, they still have all these mandates, and all this materials, and all this stuff that's coming in. And we defend those teachers when they're sued and wrongfully attacked, but it's very, very, very problematic. I'm encouraging churches and synagogues to start homeschool consortiums for those who can't homeschool and are confident about homeschooling. And then you've got an institution that doesn't want to start a private school with a hybrid that meets in between, is like a homeschool consortium where parents collectively work together. And I think we'll see more and more of that. And we at Pacific Justice will help put those together if requested. So all our work is without charge too, by the way. I forgot to tell you that. As a lawyer, it's sort of strange to say that, I know, but I know you say without charge, a lawyer, don't trust them. But it is, it's without charge, so. Yes. Without charge.
Well, with regard to the textbooks, we do have people in California working on that. Lieutenant Colonel in Texas with 50 volunteers changed textbooks for 5 million people in Texas. We
Yes.
now have a group of people in California doing that right here in California.
That's a great thing to do,
One of
yeah.
the people right here is Linda Cohen, who's in that group.
Yes.
Very instrumental.
Yeah.
And I know she would want to talk on that. I'll let her gather her thoughts and go to the next question over here.
Okay, you're a good MC. Thank you.
We sit around here like deadwood, and our children, their true Christian thoughts are being obliterated by our schools. I went to my local church and talked to the seniors, and there was only 5 there.
Okay.
My heart. So I went to the Laguna Woods High School, and I gave them a couple of my books. Then so they could see what I was about.
Okay, you went to high school, okay.
One reason after another to keep me from talking to them. But I think that we could get together and do some good speeches.
Yeah.
To take to school.
Yes, I've got something great for you. We have a resource. Am I cutting you off? I don't cut you off. Is that your? Did you have other question other than that or not?
No, I just wanted to.
Okay, good. Here's my positives, because I'm really glad you said it. Thank you, because this triggers me to mention this. We at Pacific Justice, my wife and I wrote a book. She was in full-time youth ministry before she married me. And we wrote a book. It's called Reclaim Your School. It's strategies to practically and legally evangelize public schools. And it's all about how to bring positive input into public schools in so many different ways, from the parents, from students, to teachers, to clergy, to all different, many different ways that also, of course, respect the Constitution and the proper limitations of state endorsement of religion in public schools. And but there's so many positive things. We have model policies for school board members. This book is available for just a mere $99. No, I'm joking. Like I said, everything at Pacific Justice is free, without charge. So you go to our website, you can download it for free. You have a grandson or a parent and say, hey, I downloaded this, take a look at it. Look at chapter 3, chapter 5, those are my favorite. And just take a look at some of the positive, proactive things that you as a parent, your student, your church, or synagogue, or whatever, can do, and having a positive input and influence. And we've had, this is our 4th edition. We just thought we'd put it for download. But before that, we had over 50,000 copies distributed at conferences across the country. And it's had a real impact.
How do we get it? Go to your website?
Yeah, go to our website, which is pji.org. That's P for Pacific, J for Justice, I for Institute.org. That's my radio voice coming. But anyway, pgi.org, and then under resources, you'll see in the top, you'll see resources, and then you click that, and you'll see books. Click books, resources, and then books, and then you'll see Reclaim Your School. Yeah, we also have something for business leaders on their rights in the workplace as well. to live their faith, their convictions, for free training video, also you download. That's a training video called Faith in the Workplace. Faith in the Workplace, that's free download as well. That has been used. I was actually doing these presentations for business owners all over, and someone once told me, asked me a question, said, Brad, if you knew you only had a year to live, what would you do? And I said, I'd take this presentation, I'd put it on video for massive distribution. He says, okay, why aren't you doing it? I said, you're right. So that's what we did. And now it's been used and distributed to different organizations. So,
If you didn't get a chance to write down that website, just Google Pacific Justice and you'll find Brad's
Yeah.
website there.
yeah. But yeah, pji.org.
And Linda's gonna make a quick comment on California textbooks.
Yes, please do. Thank you. And I just want to salute you for the work that you're doing and standing up. Yes.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Brad, I'm putting you on notice. You'll be one of many people that I'll be talking to in the next few months on help. What can you do to help us? I have to underscore what Brad said about homeschooling. We've come to that. And I taught in the public schools, and I love my job, and I love my kids, I love my work. I taught in the public schools for 32 years. I never
Wow.
thought I would
Right.
come to this.
Right.
But a quick
Right.
word about textbooks. I reviewed the world history books at the 7th grade level. That's where they teach the Islam unit. It was bad enough at the last generation of textbooks back in 2006. It's gotten significantly worse. They're glorifying Islam now. Islam is painted in positive terms. Western culture is painted in negative terms. The same actions done by an Anglo-Saxon group are negative and violent and bloody and bloodthirsty, and when it comes to Islam, those terms are just simply not used. Islam
Right.
is a vibrant religion,
Yes.
a new religion, a spreading religion, and they just completely ignore the violence of it. So
Right.
here's my request to you. If I could come back here, I don't want to take up your whole evening, but just maybe take a part of the evening to give you an action plan, because we're working on that right now. And I think we can do some damage in California. I genuinely believe we can, because I trust in the Lord to guide us. And I trust that there are going to be people that will be so outraged by these textbooks that they will stand up and do something.
Right.
And I'll tell you, it's more than just Islam. This new generation is the first generation to introduce the LGBT theme and make it mandatory that these lessons be taught to fourth graders and eighth graders.
Right.
That's where they're introduced. So we've got a double whammy going here, and I think we can do something about
Right.
it.
Just
Tell
for,
them, Brian.
in fact, just recently at a charter school in Rockland Academy,
Yes.
that's where a kindergarten teacher read this book called The Jazz to these little kindergartners, all about how a boy went to the doctor, and the doctor told the boy that he's a girl. Sort of skipped through some stuff here, implying that somehow he was really a girl, and so the teacher closed the book and said, okay, this boy right here, he went to the doctor, and he also found out he's really a girl, and so he's going to go to the restroom, and he's going to change, and he's going to come back a girl, and we're going to welcome Joan to the classroom. And that's what they did, and all these kids were so confused. And the parents found out, one girl was crying, and the mother said, why are you crying? Because I don't want to go to the doctor and find out that I'm really a boy. That's what she said. This boy really wanted to be, apparently felt like he wanted to be a female. And so anyway, the guardians or the parents of this boy were very supportive of the boy becoming a female like them. So anyway, it's sad. It's sad. Now, one thing in the messaging, the real problem, but mind you, was and parents under law, I mean, they have the ability to make those decisions and those choices under the law. But the problem is when school districts, even the charter school, do not respect parents by giving them prior notice of the presentation and prior respect to be able to opt their child out from hearing this presentation. That's very important. Another girl, and I think it was a first grade, second grade, referred to this boy with a male pronoun instead of a female, and was taken to the principal's office and reprimanded. A little second grader. This is Rockland Academy. The interesting thing is we at Pacific Justice were thinking of like sort of a dramatic kind of video of what could happen. And that was what the storyline was, the hypothetical of what can happen, except then it happened. So things are moving much faster. And that's what we're dealing with. Should we hate these people? No, we should love these people. These kids going through this, unfortunately, they're not the perpetrators. They're the victims. They need love and support and counseling, and they have a lot of confusion. What we won't hear, though, is that over 70%, some polls show closer to over 90% of children who have gender identity dysphoria, who actually have this confusion, work through it, even on their own, so that by the end of puberty, they've reconciled that and gone through this, and they're no longer bound by this dysphoria, this confusing dysphoria. Oh, but don't worry. Our schools are now saying, oh, if the 7-year-old says that he's a girl, even without telling the parents, they'll treat him like a girl, they'll talk to him as a girl, they'll let him use the girl's bathroom. And what does that do for his reconciling the dysphoria? A very deadly dysphoria, because the average person who has gender identity dysphoria will not live to see their 30th birthday because of depression and suicide. The other side comes back and says, well, that's because society doesn't accept them and doesn't embrace them and love them. And I admit there is some cruelty out there to people who have this confusion. But what they're not realizing, though, is that the studies also show that suicide and rate and depression rate is just as high in communities like San Francisco as it is in communities that are not friendly to it. It's not an external; it's an internal issue of confusion. And that's where it's a real shame, because our public schools, in a very cruel and inhumane way, are not reacting and responding properly to kids who have this mental condition. And that's why we have a good number of psychologists. I think it's the American College Association, or American College of American Psychiatrics, or Pediatrics, thank you, have come out, hundreds of pediatrics have come out boldly and spoken against this whole agenda as being inhumane and abusive of children. So that's the whole, sorry I got off on my rampage there.
How does that happen in a charter school, which is supposed to be privately funded, although we've heard from other speakers that they do get public funds, so they have to conform to some of these public rules? Is that what
Yes, there is some public school mandates that it has to comply with, because it is publicly funded. It doesn't have all the regulations. It's not unionized. Of course, the teachers union is trying to reverse that. But that's part of the problem there. But the good thing about charter schools, though, is you have some choice. So a lot of parents have said, forget this. This is not what I want for my child. And they pulled their children out of that school, and they put their children in another charter school, or said, hey, we'll put them in a private school or homeschool. But homeschooling is still booming in California. And because of that litigation I mentioned earlier, California is one of the safest states in the country to homeschool now, which is fantastic.
Got a question over here, and then I'm coming on the other side of the room.
I know the freedom of speech, of course, is a cherished and honored constitutional amendment. Would you consider banning any group from speaking? I'll give you an example. I don't know if you remember, back in the 70s in Skokie, Illinois, when the Nazis had paraded and demonstrated for parading in Skokie, and many of these people were Jewish and survived. They were Holocaust survivors there. Very traumatized that they had to speak. And this is one example. It's a cherished, I know freedom of speech is a cherished,
right.
But however, if it's going to traumatize the individual, I'm not talking about one kid or two, or they want their space. This is a whole group of people, 6 men that died.
Right.
What would you consider? Should
Right.
you consider any neo-Nazis that are parading and and speaking to be banned if they're
Yeah,
demonstrating or even advocating the murder of certain people?
right. I will say this. Freedom of speech is not an absolute right. There are some exceptions. For example, speech that is inciting imminent harm of threat or danger, or for the purpose of inciting violence, for example, that can be prohibited speech, and it should be. Yelling fire in a movie theater, causing harm, that can be, or conveying private information in a public way. So there's a number of exceptions that qualify for freedom of speech. Openly expressing yourself, no matter how ugly it is generally protected speech, even if we don't like it. Number one, individuals can say, I'm not going to listen to it. Or number two, they can say, you have your speech, I will have my speech, and we will demonstrate, and we will be shouting louder than you do. It's not always an easy thing because the content of someone's speech, because I know this personally, I have spoken at places, I've been to places where they scream and they yell, they want to, I was leaving the courthouse steps of the very tolerant city of San Francisco. And they were screaming and yelling, and one of them said, they were screaming and yelling, and they looked at me, and one of them says, that's him! There he is! Let's get him! He's the one! He's the attorney! And they start forming. What I told them was, I said, as they were moving towards me, and it was not good because I was totally outnumbered. It was just me and a briefcase, and I didn't even know how to use a briefcase to defend myself, so just me. And I says, I am for civil liberties. If you are against me, then who are you for? And they paused, and I walked right on through. And I just said, oh, come on, Lord, save me, save me, save me. And I walked through. And but our society is one that even when it's the hardest is when we need to look at those as opportunities for free speech and exposing the falsity of it. One thing that bothered me about, like, for example, in Virginia, Charleston, Virginia, or Charlottesville, Virginia, when they were protesting the removal of the Civil War heroes from the South, and that's very debatable. I love history, and the preservation of history, I think, is very, very, very important. But irrespective of perspective, one of the things I've exhorted people on is that even if you agree with a certain message, if there is another group coming in, do not associate and disband. Don't allow yourself to be grouped with a group like neo-Nazis that showed up. And that was the sad thing, is you had some people there who are not neo-Nazis, and they should have gone home and not associated. We need to but we need to separate ourselves from people who are not agreeing or giving the message that we're giving, so there's not that kind of confusion. Secondly, is we should never, like on the other side, use violence as a response, ever, to opposition speech. We need to simply speak louder and communicate better and make our message clear, but never ever use violence, because that's always the enemy of free speech, and we must always be on the side of free speech. But there are ways of combating evil, harmful messages, like you mentioned, and we can't ignore it, because that's actually probably the worst thing, is simply to ignore it, I think. That's very dangerous. We saw that in World War II. The Nazi rise, there were too many people who were silent and ignoring it, and we can't ignore it. So,
I got a question over here, Brad.
yes, that was a good question. Thank you, sir.
Do you think some Islamic beliefs contradict our Constitution? And then the second question, do you believe that Islam is a religion or an ideology?
That's a very, very good question. Very good question. Thank you for asking that. Next question.
He took,
No, I'm just teasing.
he actually took my question, right?
Islam is a religion, but it's also a clear prescription for a political form of government and governing. That's not even debatable. It's the Sharia law, it's all spelled out. Now, you have some Muslims who do not take that part of their faith seriously. And they like America, they like our system, and that's great. But those who take their faith very seriously, in a very committed way in that regard, and this, what the teachings of the Quran and Sharia law, they take, it's not just a religion, it's also a political objective. And that's very dangerous. I was on to give it proper perspective, also, it's some who have that perspective are not necessarily all for violence either. A Pew worldwide research study was done. It showed roughly 85% of the world is not in favor of using violence and murder in the name of their religion to further their religion, as far as of the Muslims of the world, 85%. That means 15% of over 1 billion people
1.8.
yeah, want to use, are willing to use violence and killing in the name of furthering their religion. In the United States, it's actually, I think it's closer to 3%. We have one of the Muslims of the United States are actually percentage-wise one of the safest Muslim groups of any country in the world. And so I think sometimes we can be overreactive if we see someone who's Muslim and just assuming reality. It's highly unlikely that they're in favor of using violence to further their faith, and they need to be given the same respect. And many of them have the same love and desire for America and our freedoms and our Constitution. It's just, but what does the religion teach? What do the zealots follow? It's not just religion, it is also politics, and I think that needs to be carefully examined for anyone coming to this country, the extent to which they are fully committed to the basic principles of our Constitution, which is the glue that holds us together as we the people. No matter who we are, no matter what we believe, no matter how different we are, the glue are the fundamental rights and understandings of government, of the Constitution. And without that, it's very, very dangerous for the preservation of the United States, in my opinion. So that answers your question. There's a long-winded way around it.
I'd just like to follow up on that one. And this is a tricky one.
Yes.
I mean, you cannot follow the religion of Islam and say I don't follow Sharia law. That means you're either a bad Muslim or you're going to kill. You're lying on purpose to further your cause. So,
and the lying is a real aspect too. You're right. That needs to be looked at. You are right. I was sitting next to a gentleman on an airplane once who was Muslim. We start talking, because I just talk on airplanes. You talk about, those people that just keep talking and just annoy you? I'm sorry, I'm one of them, okay? And I was sitting there talking to this guy, and we were talking about faith and Muslim, and I noticed he ordered an alcoholic beverage. I said, excuse me, is that alcohol? He goes, yeah, yes, yes it is. I said, oh, that's great. He says, why? I said, well, that means you don't really take your faith all that seriously, and I don't have to worry about this plane trip. So, anyway. But he sort of smiled and wasn't sure about me. But
you actually said that.
Yeah, actually I did. I know. Yeah, but I was laughing. But the reality is, most aren't dogmatic, and especially here in the United States, they have their faith, they have their beliefs, but and so I just think we got to be careful not to overreact just because someone's Muslim. That was my point, and to treat them with respect and human dignity, and be a positive reaction of true Americanism, which is human dignity and respect for all people. So,
as they become more and more a higher percentage of the population, as they do with civilization jihad, as they do in other places,
right.
Even the non-violent ones, the peaceful ones that love America, who do you think they're going to side with in the end as the population gets higher and higher percentage? Right?
Yeah, and actually, well, historically, they are often, if they don't side with them, they're intimidated by the more radical Islam. In a lot of countries of the world, that intimidation is very real. They know if they speak out, they get their throat slit. Or their families get killed, so they're silent. And because they don't believe in violence, and those with the guns or the knives or the swords, they're the radicals, and they do. And so that's that I think that both of those scenarios are scenarios that could happen. Europe actually is much more challenged by that, and their response to it is much more intensive and serious than the United States response is, because of both violence as well as the numbers that they're dealing with. So, but let's move on here. Oh, yes.
I just want to make two short comments first.
Sure,
One,
go ahead.
To the gentleman who mentioned the thing in Skokie, as offensive as it might be, I think it's better that those people reveal themselves to the public and to the media so that if they ever run for political office, that can be used against them. I would rather know my enemy and what he's thinking rather than think he's my friend and he has a completely different alternative.
Yeah. And to know that they're there, because frankly, I mean, it's even, I didn't even think any of these people even existed, and then they come out like Charlottesville. I'm going like, dang, there's that many of them? I mean, there's like, I think there are 5,000 or 6,000 throughout the United States that fit in that category. But even still, I thought they were all gone. I thought it was part of history.
My other comment was I actually wrote a letter to Clarence Thomas asking him, if for the benefit of his country, if he would step down. But I used the caveat, I said, approach Trump with a deal that he'll step down so that he can appoint a younger man.
Yes.
As long as he gets to offer him the list of 3 that he must choose from.
Oh, that'd be nice.
That Clarence Thomas did.
Yeah.
But my question, earlier in your speech, you mentioned about how something like 125 people are getting ready to be appointed to the bench. Just to give us an idea, how many of those federal people are there? Is that like 10% of the population of judges and whatever, or is it like 25? Is it a big chunk, or just a minor addition?
No, it's a big chunk. It's a big chunk, and I don't know the exact percentage. If we're looking at 10, 20%, 15%, but that's a big chunk in terms of shifting the majorities in the courts. I mean, that's a big move, big move.
And lastly, you see, like you said, the bad cases in California are blessings in disguise. That's something you can use to set precedent in the future. Do you ever see some things that you would like to see addressed? Mark Levin does this an awful lot with certain things. But to see something that you would like and sort of look for a case that you can latch onto to get going through the courts to maybe create that precedent that you hadn't thought of or that someone else is not finding?
Yes, well, a couple things. One is we'd like to see a case, I'd like to see a case where, say, a 13, 14-year-old girl who has been visually violated by a 16-year-old boy in a locker room, whose parents have the boldness to come forward and let us represent her. So we can take this privacy issue all the way to the Supreme Court in a very clear, crystallized way. I would love to see that. Not to see the harm to a girl, but it's already happening. Almost every high school has transgenders now in California. It's not a fluke thing. It's everywhere. It's exploded, literally exploded throughout our schools. Most high schools have a transgender, and especially in the Bay Area, it's almost like a fad. And yet the stakes are very high. The other thing I'd like to see is proper case law, or if not that, say legislative reform, giving greater due process protection to families before a social worker can simply, upon a rumor, barge into their house, take a child, and the parents never see that child again without proper due process protection. We give more protection to O.J. Simpson and people who are nearly, likely murderers. They get more civil rights protection, due process protection, than a loving parent of a child being able to want to just simply keep their child from being taken from them. And California is one of the worst states in the country. That's one reason why, one of the things we do, I give emergency counsel to parents all across the country on my cell phone, 24/7, on crises when they have a social worker knocking at their door. Because once the child's taken, we can't help them. But beforehand, we have a very, very high success rate of keeping that child from being wrongfully taken. So, and no one knows about that because we don't talk about it on my radio show, which, by the way, is on over 100 stations now across the country. It's the Dacus Report. The guy who does it is awesome. I mean, it's my show. It's my show. But it's the Dacus Report. Here you can listen to it at 107.9 FM, K-Wave, Saturday mornings at 10:30 a.m.
You, I didn't know that.
That was me.
I turn on all the time.
That guy's me. Do you like? Well, it just depends. Do you like the show?
Much better than I thought you would.
Oh, thank you.
That should also be in our announcement too, so if you have the announcement in your email, look at that too. So.
Yeah,
Got a question back here, Brad?
sure.
So Brad,
Thank you.
I'm a real concerned about the youth of our country.
Yes, me too.
Some statistics, the millennials now, apparently 50% of them would rather live under a communist government than under a free capitalist. No, actually communist, not
Yeah.
socialist, communist. They would
Yeah.
prefer to be under communist.
Right.
The other statistic that really concerns me is this country was based upon Judeo-Christian ethics
Right.
and the Constitution
Right.
and the Declaration of Independence, and a biblical worldview. The latest statistics on the youngest generation is that only 0.5% have a biblical worldview and don't have a sense of values.
Right. Right.
Trump made an amazing statement during his inauguration. He said, this is not a shift from the one party to the other. It's a shift from the government to the people,
Right.
to we the people.
Right.
I have a sense that's what needs to happen in this country, but I think we the people are still waiting for Trump and the Democrats and the Republicans to do their thing. My question is, are there any organizations that you know of that are organizing and saying, yeah, we want to grab the bull by the horn and move forward to something that we used to have, maybe in a creative way?
Maybe in a creative way. Yeah, I would say homeschoolers of America, the homeschooling, are probably doing the greatest to, some call them the remnant, if you will, but they are very successful in college. More importantly, they're very successful out of college. They advance faster in corporations and in public policy and public service than any other grouping, whether private schools, public schools, charter schools. And I hired one, in fact. I hired one who skipped college, went straight to law school. I was so impressed. Matt McReynolds, incredible. But so I think that's as far as that goes. And then also I think people who are sincere, this may sound sort of strange, but sincere in living their faith. I was once on you say, where's he come from with that statement? Well, I was once on a radio show. It was a secular, not a religious, conservative news talk show. And he has to ask me the question. And I wasn't going to talk faith on the show at all because I want to be respectful of the audience in every way, But I have to be honest. And he said, Brad, what case, what law, what thing do we do to turn this country around, to reverse this trend? What do we need? And I had to respond sincerely. And I said, well, and I don't want to offend anyone with different religious views, but this is my personal perspective. I said, well, the only way for the long term, I believe, to turn this nation around is for people throughout the United States of America to come to a personal relationship with God through faith in Christ. And then there was dead silence. I mean, dead silence. On radio, that's like, you just don't have that. And then he finally goes, because he's secular, what else? I said, long term, that's it. And then I took him off the hook, and I said, but we can talk some short-term measures to hold back the dikes from. He goes, let's talk about that. I said, okay, good. And but Judeo-Christian values and faith in general, and the reason that's so critical is because and our founding fathers knew it's individual conscience, it's individual accountability and responsibility that comes through real faith. That is what holds a nation together, that allows liberty to reign. Without individual moral accountability, without something that keeps us and controls us other than just getting caught and having to pay a penalty and punishment, but something in terms of internal conscience that only can be strengthened statistically through a personal and real living faith, that's how we have freedom and liberty. Because without that, we don't have the constraints in our society. We need greater government control and supervision, and it takes away our freedom and liberty out of necessity to maintain order. And that's why our founding fathers says that a free society is one that is a is predetermined to be a society premised upon people of faith. And that, it sounds sort of weird coming from an attorney making that statement, because you think I'd say, well, we can file lawsuits, and in the long run, though, it's really we the people, and taking our faith seriously and living our faith seriously. And sometimes it's hard times that really allow that to shine the greatest. Now, we have relatively great times right now, but I tell people, if we're blessed with hard times, as twisted as that sounds, with that comes an incredible opportunity to let our faith shine and to transform lives in a very positive way for many generations. That's a deep answer to your deep question.
You mentioned workplace is one of the issues that you fight for. Can you say some of the issues that are going on in the workplace that you're advocating?
Yes. One was the professor I told you about, who was fired because of his just balanced worldview at his teaching. There's another professor we defended as well. We also have defended teachers who've also been attacked. We also defend people who work for the government. You know what's really weird? 9 out of 10, at least, of our cases dealing with harassment, discrimination based on faith in the workplace, it's not the private employers. It's the government. State, local, federal government. They are the biggest bigots and discriminators against people of faith out there, by far, overwhelmingly. And so we jump on these cases, and we go to bat to defend people who are belittled, ostracized, pushed out because of faith. And one of the problems with that, one of the reasons for that is because the government isn't driven by free market principles. See, if the private sector does that, they may lose one of the most qualified accountants they have in their company. They don't want to do that. They'll let their own personal bias and prejudice be aside and keep this fantastic accountant because they have a profit motive. Government has no profit motive. So what's their incentive to have tolerance here? They don't have dilly squat incentive. Let's get rid of them. Let's just make this the most comfortable little working place, because it's not about output. It's not about producing. It's about an environment that feels comfortable to me because I'm the government. They work for the government. So that's why we need a government as small as we can, because government in and of itself has tyrannical aspects to it that we don't have in the private sector. That's a whole other talk. But anyway.
Is there anything that's a basic goal of a communist government or a left-leaning government?
Yes.
To replace God with government.
Yes, and it's really interesting. When people tell me about religion is such faith is such a dangerous thing in society, it's so dangerous because people who killed and stuff and all of this stuff. The Inquisition. I said, really, the Inquisition. I think it was about 3,000 people in the Inquisition, and at last that was 300 people who 3,000 who died over 300 years, or a 300 period of Inquisition. Okay, that's pretty bad. That's like one of the worst scenarios you can look at historically for faith. Now let's compare that with Adolf Hitler. He was a man who was his own religion. He created his own Aryan religion. If you read and study what he believed, and he was basically his own end resolve. Mein Kampf was his Bible. How many millions died under that? I mean, it's millions. We'll say millions. What was worse? Stalin. Stalin, was he a religious man? Stalin, no, he wrote his own book.
The Inquisition was pretty bad.
The Inquisition was bad. It was bad. But when you compare it, I'm just saying, when you compare it relative to the numbers, and then we'd look at Mao Zedong. Not hundreds of millions. I was like, what was it, 20 million that died? Some say more. But huge numbers died. Then we had the Pol Pot regime, Cambodia. Hideous what they did and killed there. As far as you keep going down the list, you finally get the Armenian genocide, that took place in the early 1900s in Turkey. You have to go all the way down those other lists before you even get to anything, and that's dealing with, once again, with a different religious viewpoint perspective. So,
If you have not asked the question yet, raise your hand. I'll try to get the mic over to you before I get to someone who has already asked the question.
I'll try to keep my answers shorter, sorry. I'm a lawyer.
Brad, thanks so much for all you do. I just want to let you know that I homeschooled my children, but it was back in the early 80s, and they're alive and well. And in fact, I wrote a book, Empowering Parents to Educate, so if you do need some more information on that, you can see me about that. You have a copy, Brad.
Good.
But regarding the Islam issues, I was just wondering, there's one thing, they're running for office now.
Right.
And they're running for governor, they're running for attorney general in California. But have you had any court cases regarding anything related to female mutilation, laws that are established in the United States, or some regarding the hijab, that maybe they've been pulled over for some traffic and they've taken they grabbed their hijab off. Have you had any court cases that you've had to either rule against or
Or the hijab, the rights of individuals to wear their hijab?
Well, any court cases regarding what they view as their religious freedom.
Right. And there's a balancing there. For example,
Yes.
like for example, I'll say a woman who's going through security and she wants the black, the most extreme, and they have just a little slit there and she can't remove it. Now, our national security is a compelling state interest that trumps that individual religious. If there's any way we can reasonably accommodate that, maybe have women examine her in a separate room, taking off the thing. Okay, that's great. We'd say that's good. Accommodate. But at the end of the day, she has to take it off. People must be identified. And I think that's the balancing.
But have you had court cases that you had to defend that?
The closest I had was I was an advocate. The case was dealing with actually Disneyland, and a woman who was insisting on wearing a hijab thing. Now Disneyland has costumes, strict costumes that they must wear, and the law in California up to that time was, if you have, generally speaking, you must let people wear what they need to for religiously for their faith, unless you have a strict costume regimen, and that trumps that for consistency. And I was an advocate saying that Disneyland is legally entitled, and they were, to having costumes and having those respected, and that someone can request to work in an area where the costume is going to accommodate their personal, that can be reasonable accommodation, but not to allow them to wear something that's divergent from the costume that they're wearing. And that they prevailed, the Disneyland prevailed. Then a law was passed in California trumping that exemption. And so that's how that ended up. But there's a balancing of respect for people's faith, to practice that, to wear, with also the compelling state interest to maintain identity and for security reasons. And so I think that's the proper perspective, in my opinion.
I'm on this side of the room, right?
Yes.
I'm going to bring back another issue, same issue as being discussed. Now, I know generally you don't teach communism in school, and you don't teach Nazism in school. Now, if a religion is more than a religion, if they have a belief which conflicts with the Constitution, then I would say it's more than a religion. So the question is, can you teach that in school? Islam, again, is not just a religion. It teaches a doctrine. And one could compare it to communism and Nazism because it conflicts with the Constitution in many ways.
Right.
Now, I realize that you're in the public eye, and I know politicians are in the public eye, so there's a certain danger with expressing their point of view. But I would think that teaching Islam in school would be illegal because it conflicts with the Constitution.
Right. Constitutionally, legally speaking, it's constitutional to teach about religion, so long as there's not proselytizing. Now, the problem we have in California is that what is being taught is so biased that it's really not objective, it's not teaching about, it really is proselytizing in many ways. It used to be worse, by the way. There was a textbook out across the centuries for 7th graders. A number of years ago, we challenged different parts of it with the State Department of Education, the curriculum committee, we had several professors write scholarly critiques of the book and its accuracy. One of the things we protested is where it said that Jerusalem is where Jesus died and was buried and where Muhammad rose to heaven. End quote. It was a statement of historical fact. They presented that, not a statement of this is what Muslims believe. I had a problem with that. Another thing they said is how, they pointed out is how Islam liberated women and to give them dignity and respect as from their predecessors. I don't even have to comment on that one. And that was another one that was protest. There was a few others. And they were brought, and they were taken out across the centuries, made some revisions. Well, since though, it's still been PC'd even more though, in some ways, and it's still very biased. You still have kids are acting out, dressing like in Islam, and they doing the prayer, "Hail be to Allah, Lord creation," doing all this stuff. If you had kids doing the reciting the Ten Commandments or reciting the Lord's Prayer or something, you'd say that's unconstitutional. But somehow reciting the fundamental prayer, Muslim prayer, they're doing that. So it's really twisted. It is very twisted, and it's very dangerous. We did our homework, by the way, when we were challenging that 7th grade textbook, and I remember there was one American who was from Oregon, joined the Taliban in Afghanistan. And it was a young person. This was back early on. Maybe you guys remember that or not. He was an American. And I was wondering, I wonder if he somehow read that book. So I did my homework and I found out where he went to school when he was in junior high. It was my own independent thing. I thought, I got to find this out. Turns out he didn't have junior high in Oregon. He had junior high in California, just north of San Francisco. What's it? That starts with an M. The county. Marin. Thank you, Marin County. And that was the book they were using across the centuries. And that's probably where he just learned, and the seed was planted for that indoctrination. So, yeah, we need to reform it so it's objective. It doesn't gang up on any religion, but it's just objective. If it talks about theology, it should always be qualified. This is what they believe, this group. And that's a real problem. But we don't have, it's very twisted, and a lot of it is such that they don't even see it. They think they're engaging in some kind of great tolerance. In reality, it's great intolerance and discrimination. So, yeah, I have one more question because I want to be sitting on, because I don't want to, what time am I supposed to be over, by the way? I'm really...
9-ish.
9-ish? Okay. This is the last question, and then we'll close up. Well, here's the good news.
After you're done, you'll talk to people, right?
Yeah, I'll take her question too also. Go ahead. We'll do it real quickly. Go ahead.
Actually, I have two things real quick. A while back, you were talking about the violence, anti-protest violence.
Yes.
I loved when I saw what the New York Police Department did to Mayor de Blasio when they just stood and turned their backs.
Yes.
And I think any time we have one of these like neo-Nazi groups, the white supremacists, any of those, if we would go out and simply do that en masse.
Yeah. That's actually a great idea.
The other thing I wanted to comment on, somebody raised the question a while ago, what can we do? Most of us here have a lot of time. We can volunteer.
For Pacific Justice Institute. We are looking for volunteers, by the way, in our Santa Ana office.
I'm a retired paralegal.
Yeah, we need volunteers, so go ahead.
But volunteer for political
Yes, yes.
Find out who the candidates are for city council and especially for school board.
Yes.
Who are conservative, who are supporting the Constitution. Go stuff envelopes, answer phones.
Yes.
Walk precincts.
Yes.
Unfortunately, our local newspaper, the Orange County Register, since it's been on life support,
I know.
has become increasingly liberal.
I know. I canceled my subscription.
The only time that we see any conservative expressions are through letters to the editor.
Right.
We need to be writing those.
Right, that's a good point.
And the other time we see them is an occasional editorial.
Right, good point.
Other than that, they're sourcing their stories from the New York Times
I know.
and from.
Yeah, I don't like the Orange County Register anymore. I canceled that, and I commented on my radio show about
But letters
them
to
too.
the editor.
Right, excellent. Letters to the editor.
Our conservative candidate.
Very good. And then, by the way, and have someone proofread your letter to the editor too, to make sure it's what you're really trying to communicate, because sometimes there can be miscommunications that they take advantage of. And what, ma'am, go ahead. I want to courtesy to you. Yes.
You want to get?
Just go ahead. Yeah, I'll hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, the other people are here. Just bring it in.
I was watching a Clouder video, and they had that Alexis, you know, that box that you ask questions to and it answers. You know what I'm talking about? It's a computer box.
Computer box?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
They
little
ask
thing
you questions.
Yeah.
So they asked it about Muhammad. They gave a lovely talk about how lovely Muhammad was. And then Clouder asked them, who was Jesus Christ? And he said, a fictional character.
Which one was this? Is this iCloud or was it?
Alexis.
Alexis.
Amazon.
Really? I'll get more information about that. I'd love to find that out and blast them. I mean, correct it on my show. It's really, I am one of those blessed, fortunate, because I'm the head of a legal organization that can sue, and then I've got a radio show that can blast out. So it's so great being a zealot when you have those two things. So I'm real fortunate. If you guys, once again, the biggest compliment you can give me is to fill this out. So if you haven't yet and you are getting our stuff, please, please, please do that, and we'll keep you updated. And we don't give out tons of stuff. We don't believe in junk mail every week. I hate when people do that to me. So thank you very much, and thank you for coming. It means a lot that you stayed here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Richard.